They started innocently enough. Don't forget your keys. Read the first message scrawled on a sticky note in loopy letters. It had been left on my fridge door. It immediately grabbed my attention, because at the time I lived alone, I had no memory of writing it, and the handwriting didn't match mine or anyone I knew. I was slightly perturbed, but wasn't sure how to react. In the end, I just tossed the note and went to work. The second note came a few days later, left on my kitchen counter. The sticky note was pink this time, but still had the same distinctive loopy handwriting. Make sure to pack a lunch today. Again, I was unsettled. Now, any normal person might have reported this to the police, but during that time I was going through a major depressive spell. I had moved to a new city, away from my friends and family, and had started a new job that I quickly realized I hated and didn't nearly pay enough. Home was lonely and work was soul-crushing. I had trouble enough getting out of bed each morning, let alone filing a report that I am sure the police would not take seriously. Even more stressed, I crumpled up the note. However, I ended up packing a small lunch for myself. Usually I didn't bother to put in the effort, and just ate cafeteria food, but against my better judgment I fulfilled the wishes of the note. That day, the cafeteria was closed. The main cafeteria fridge had broken overnight, and many of the frozen lunches inside had gone bad. Management thought it would be better to shut it down for the day. A feeling of unease settled in my stomach after learning the news. It was as if the note had predicted it. The notes continued throughout the following weeks. They would typically show up on random days, no more than 3 notes to a day. They were all left in obvious places in my apartment, all on sticky notes, and in that unfamiliar loopy handwriting they began to grow more prophetic. Take I-80 today. There will be a bad accident on your way. Home. Janet is going to offer you some cookies at the office. Politely decline. They will give you food poisoning. Marie has been on a diet. Compliment her on her weight loss. She'll end up thinking well of you. Of course, I tested the notes to see if they were accurate. Every time I ignored their advice, whatever it warned against came true. One day a note said to pack an umbrella, and I purposely didn't. It was forecasted to be sunny that day, so any normal person wouldn't think to pack one, but sure enough, I got soaked that evening, walking to my car. I was incredibly curious about the notes. There were so many questions I had about them, and those unanswered questions kept festering in my head. I tried writing notes back in return and leaving them out, but never got a response. I'd speak out loud and ask questions, as if or in case the note writer could somehow hear me. But this only made me feel foolish. I'd occasionally make a surprise visit home at odd hours just to see if I could catch the note writer leaving their notes. Of course, I never caught them. I tried installing cameras in my apartment, even making sure all of the cameras were completely hidden. But the next day, I found every single one of the cameras' insides completely torn out and placed on the kitchen table with a single note next to them reading, "Never do that again." The notes stopped coming after that, which made me deeply regretful. I had grown accustomed to the notes. I had begun to rely on them. Even they had significantly improved my way of life over the last few months, both mentally, financially, and socially. I had actually started making friends at the office, thanks to their advice, and for the first time in my life I was even a bit popular. My managers, who before the notes didn't pay much interest in me, now valued my presence and would ask for my opinion on projects. It was no secret I was on my way to a promotion. Could I still do that without the notes I also valued? The note as a friend, as weird as that sounds, or more like a guardian angel. Wherever they were from, they were always protecting me. Without them, the future was suddenly unknown, dangerous. Every time some mild annoyance popped up from that point, from bad traffic to stressful work situations, and even a minor paper cut, I thought about how this all probably could have been avoided if I still had the notes. The next week, a bright green sticky note appeared on my bathroom mirror. "Don't forget to call Mom today. It is her birthday." I nearly cried. I decided to sack my investigation and just accept things as they were. Slowly the fog of my depressive spell began to lift, and I could feel myself returning to how I used to be. My confidence rose, and for the first time in a while I felt in equilibrium with my life. I went out, cracked jokes, and even managed to clean up my apartment. I also managed to get a girlfriend somehow. Her name was Amanda. I met her at a pub when I was out with my buddies. The best part of all this is that for some reason she seemed to actually be into me. She was gorgeous, way out of my league, really, with long auburn hair that reached down to her back, with soft brown eyes. Her laugh was lovely, and the lemon-scented perfume she liked to wear was intoxicating. She was the type of girl you could chat with for hours and never run out of things to talk about. The relationship was still new, so I was trying not to plan our whole future together in my head, but she was so lovable, it was hard not to. At some point I briefly thought about telling her about the notes. I've always wanted to tell someone about it, but never really had anyone to tell up until now. I decided not to, however afraid she might think I was crazy. There was no point so early in the relationship making her think I was a loon, plus I was afraid the notes might stop again. If whoever was leaving them clearly didn't want me looking into them, how would they react if I shared what was happening with somebody? So at the moment I kept it to myself. Amanda had a hobby of cooking and had invited me to her house on Saturday for, in her words, the best fucking spaghetti you'll ever eat. I was pumped, since this was the first time I would actually visit her house. I was in a good mood that evening as I was getting ready for the date. I hummed to myself, happily thinking about how lovely this was going to be, and went downstairs. To grab my keys on the kitchen counter was a new hot pink sticky note. I picked it up, instinctively. Kill your girlfriend. My brain stopped for a moment. I read it once, twice, a third time, the words flashing in my brain, but hitting an error every time. I set the note down and gulped, feeling nauseous. Anxiously, I went to my car and started driving. I tried not to think about the note, but the words kept circling in my mind. Kill your girlfriend. The notes have never failed me before, and they were always in my best interest, as far as I knew, which was admittedly not much. Maybe they were wrong this time. Maybe it wasn't meant to be taken literally. Kill could be a synonym for breakup, right? My mind kept trying to make up poor excuses. The whole way there, by the time I arrived, I was a sweaty mess, and not a lick calmer. I pulled down my sun visor to check my face, and a bright green sticky note fluttered out. I went cold. The notes had never appeared outside my house beforehand. Shaking, I picked up the note and read it. Kill Amanda. Take the gun from your glove box and shoot her. I looked at my glove box wide-eyed. I did indeed keep a handgun in my glove box for safety purposes. I wanted to puke to believe this wasn't happening. Again, I ignored the note and walked up to Amanda's house, trying to shake the message from my mind. She answered the door almost immediately after I rang the doorbell. "Hey, what's up?" she said with a bright smile. But when she saw my face, the smile dropped. "You okay, Gary? What's wrong?" she said in concern. "Nothing," I lied, trying to force a smile. "Well, actually, I think I have a bit of a stomach ache." Come in," she said, ushering me in. The inside of her house was cute and homely, and she fretted over me weirdly as she led me over to her kitchen table. She then took my hand and rubbed it comfortingly. "If you're not feeling up to spaghetti, we can always have it another time. Don't worry about it. Do you want any antacids or something?" I smiled. The way she was so concerned for me over a simple stomach ache made me fall in love with her all over again. My heart panged with both love and guilt. The aroma of cooked spaghetti was also extremely strong, and even though she said it was fine, I knew it would probably be a bummer for her to pack away all that spaghetti after just making it. "I'm fine, sweetie. I probably have a stomach ache because I haven't eaten much today. I was looking forward so much for your spaghetti." Her smile returned again. I always loved how fast she smiled at things. "Well then, Mr. Hungry, let me grab you a bowl." She left for the kitchen. I reclined back and sighed, sticking my hands in my pockets. I felt a crinkle of paper. Shit. I pulled the paper out of my right pocket. Take your chair and bash your head in. I had a hard time controlling my breathing as I stuffed the note back in my right pocket. I also felt paper in my left pocket, and against my mind, screaming for me not to. I pulled it out, realizing that it was actually 2 notes crinked together. Shakily, I unwrinkled the first note. Do not eat the spaghetti drugged. What's that? Gary asked. Amanda behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I stuffed the notes back in my left pocket. Oh, Jay, just some note from work I forgot was in my pocket is all I said in a weird voice. She frowned, looked like she wanted to say something, but then thought better of it. Here, babe, she said, gently handing me a bowl of spaghetti. It looked heavenly. I wanted to puke. She sat next to me with her own bowl. She rested her head in her hands and looked at me excitedly, expectantly. I stared at her blankly. Well, take a bite, silly, she said, gesturing towards my bowl. I'm so sorry. I really need to use your bathroom. I jumped up and started looking for her bathroom. She jumped up after me, looking confused. Gary, what's wrong? You've been acting weird. When I found the right door, I went in and locked the door behind me. She kept knocking and knocking. Gary, seriously, what's wrong with you? Is the stomach ache that bad? Talk to me, Gary, please. I backed up and against the bathroom wall, then sank down to the floor. I pulled out the 2 notes from my left pocket again. This time, reading the second note, my heart sank. My husband went missing 6 months ago. Just went out to work one day and never came home. It was a horrible shock to the whole neighborhood because things like that just didn't happen in our little slice of white picket fence suburbia. The police launched an investigation, and the neighborhood watch sent out search parties, but no one ever found any evidence to indicate what had happened to him. Our families were devastated recently. The missing posters have been taken down or papered over. The updates from the police became less frequent and dwindled away. I accepted that, hard as it was to admit my Rick wasn't coming back, until he did. A week ago, I was in the back garden watering my petunias when I heard the garden gate creak open. I jerked my head in that direction, and there he was, exactly the same as he was the day he disappeared. Same windswept blonde hair and bright blue eyes, same curl to his pink lips. I was in shock. Our families had mourned for him, and yet there he was, standing in our garden like he had just popped out for milk or something. When I asked where he had been, he said he didn't know. He couldn't remember anything about the last 6 months. All our family and friends are beside themselves with joy. They almost can't believe it. But that's just the thing, I don't believe it. Look, I understand how crazy this all sounds, I do. Our families would never believe me, and I can't go to the police unless I want to end up in a straitjacket. But I just know that the man sleeping next to me isn't my husband. I don't know what to do, I know. I should be happy, but I'm not. I'm terrified. I don't know much about anything supernatural or paranormal. I don't even like watching horror movies, but something about this whole situation makes my skin crawl. Just let me explain why I'm so sure. Once I've done that, hopefully one of you will believe me, and you'll be able to tell me what to do. The morning after Rick came home, I made him a cup of tea. When I handed it to him, he gave me the brightest smile. Then he took a sugar cube from the dish on the table and dropped it into the cup. Our house was in chaos with his return, and I was still in shock, so I didn't think much of it at the time, but it's been replaying in my mind ever since. I know it doesn't sound very significant, but my husband never put sugar in his tea. He was always adamant that it ruined the taste, and he'd get so frustrated if I ever put sugar in his cup by accident. And yet, this man had sugar. Then it was the golf. A few days ago, when he was out visiting his mom, I recorded a golf tournament that was showing on the TV. It was one of Rick's favorite golfers that was competing, and he never missed it. Once he even skipped out on an anniversary dinner just to watch a championship. Only when he came home from his parents and I told him what I'd done, He just seemed unbothered, like he said thanks and everything, and then he asked if I wanted to get dinner. He didn't even watch it, and that's just so out of character for him. Then one night I woke up around 2 and to see Rick's face inches from mine just looking at me with these blank eyes, I kind of gave this nervous laugh and asked, "Baby, what are you doing?" And he didn't answer. For like a solid 30 seconds he just stared, almost like he was looking right through me. Then he suddenly smiled and said, "Sorry, honey, sometimes I just can't believe this is real." Then he just rolled over and went to sleep. I didn't get much sleep after that myself. Yesterday, about a week after he came home, the neighborhood threw a street party to celebrate his return. Everyone from our street and the streets on either side turned up to see him and tell him how happy they are that he's all right. When he wasn't standing with his arm around my waist, he was milling around, chatting amicably to each and every one of our neighbors, even the little kids. Jackson, our next-door neighbor, Sally's toddler, wanted to play peekaboo, and Rick happily played along with a smile. Now, my husband never did that, Rick always said. He didn't like kids. That's why we never had any, and he never wanted to play with any of the neighborhood children, especially not Jackson. Rick all but avoided him. Before he disappeared, I had started to suspect it was so I wouldn't see them together, and noticed the subtle but unmistakable similarities. The final nail in the coffin, proverbially speaking, was Sally. Just this morning she came knocking on our door. Her excuse was the tray of brownies she carried, but I think she just wanted to push her way into our mourning so that she could see for herself what the situation was. After she left, I called her a nosy busybody. Rick laughed, kissed my head, and agreed with me. That was when I knew for sure it couldn't really be him. Rick always used to get so mad whenever I insulted Sally, like I didn't have any right to hate her, even though she'd been fucking my husband for years. But today there was none of that. He didn't even try to defend her. I know what you must be thinking. If he was in an accident or something, he might have had some kind of traumatic brain injury that caused him to forget some things about his life, maybe even change his personality, and that's a valid, reasonable explanation. I have no doubt it's what the police would tell me if I reported all this, but you know why I'm dead certain that man isn't my husband. He doesn't have a scar. If he was really Rick, he'd have a scar on the side of his forehead shaped like the golf club I hit him with. But there's nothing. Not a mark. Honestly, I'm this close to going out tonight and digging up my petunias, just to make sure he's still under there. I don't know what I'm sharing a bed with, but I know it's not my husband. He looks and sounds exactly like Rick, his own. Parents don't even notice the difference, but he doesn't act like him at all, which tells me again that he is a stranger, that he never knew me before this, and he certainly never knew Rick. He doesn't enjoy the things Rick enjoyed. He doesn't say the sort of things Rick said. He doesn't complain, doesn't raise his voice, doesn't lie or gaslight or cheat. Frankly, he's a better husband than Rick ever was. Honestly, when I think about it like that, I'm almost tempted just to let it go. I tried to let it go, not to get caught up in worrying, and just accept my new life for what it is. But I find myself unable to let it go, because even though this man seems ordinary and kind and reasonable, there's one thing that scares me still. For someone to have so confidently taken Rick's place, they would somehow have to be sure themselves that the real Rick would not return to complicate their plans, however innocent or sinister those plans may be. Whoever this man is who is calling himself Rick, he must surely know that Rick is dead, and if he knows that, I would bet anything that he also knows how I've gambled with my life and my freedom before, and I'm not about to do so again. A couple of you suggested that Rick might have had a twin, that for whatever reason I never knew about, or perhaps a doppelganger who saw his chance at a more comfortable life and took it. Either of these seemed to me to be the closest to the realm of possibility, so they were the first theories I set out to confirm or disprove. A DNA test would surely be able to confirm whether this man is my husband's twin or someone completely unrelated. Of course, I was hardly Going to tell him about it, at best he would refuse, and at worst, well, I didn't want to find out. So about a week after my last post, I ordered 2 separate DNA tests designed for finding one's relatives and ancestors, and had them delivered whilst Rick was at work. Then a few nights later, I waited until he was asleep, actually asleep, not half asleep and staring, and I pulled out a few strands of his hair, not enough that it would be noticeable in the morning, but sufficient amount to send away in a little tube to be analyzed. Much to my relief, he didn't wake up. I sent the hair away to the DNA test companies, and they told me I'd have to wait a couple of weeks for the results. In those couple of weeks, things have gotten stranger, shall we say. You see, I've noticed that Rick never seems to eat of his own accord. Like he'll make dinner for us both, but that seems more to do with when I mention that I'm hungry than with his own desire to eat. He doesn't snack between meals. He never goes for a glass of water. I don't even think he takes anything with him to work for lunch. There's something else, too. Rick's beard trimmer is still in its box exactly where he left it 6 months ago, covered in dust and quite obviously unused. And yet Rick has been home for nearly a month, and his beard doesn't seem to be any longer, even though he used to trim it twice a week. On top of that, the staring has become a frequent occurrence, and not just in the middle of the night I catch. And watching me during the day, too, always looking away or laughing it off whenever I notice him doing it. Anyway, I might as well tell you why. I'm writing this now because I can't make head or tail of the situation anymore. The DNA tests came back in the mail this afternoon before Rick came home from work. I opened them quickly, eager to see who was included in the list of relatives, whether there were any names. I recognized either way it would answer my question, only I don't have an answer. All I have are more questions, because the first test came back as inconclusive, with a note from the company telling me I had to send them a viable hair sample in order for it to work. I didn't understand that I'd cut the hair myself after all. And what did they mean by viable? But it was the second test that concerned me the most, where there should have been information about demographic and regional origin. There was nothing, only a line of printed black letters spelling out the word unknown. Where there should have been a list of relatives and ancestors, there was no one. Not just no one related to Rick, no, I mean no one. According to the DNA test, this man has no relatives, no family, no ancestors, no biological connections, near or distant. That should be impossible, right? How can a person exist without any kind of relation, and how can he come from nowhere? I'm typing this up on the computer in the study with several tabs open on various Google searches as I try to figure out how this could be possible. And then I hear it clear as day coming from the doorway behind me. Rebecca. If I didn't know better, I'd say my heart stopped. I would know that voice anywhere. I never heard him come in, never even heard the door open. Dimly, in the back of my mind, I recall that our door creaks every time it opens. How could I not have heard it? I turn over my shoulder towards not Rick, a false bright smile on my face. He is not smiling. His face is calm, but there's something hard about the line of his mouth that sets me on edge. What the hell is this? His voice is perfectly level, but something about it makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There's an undertone to his voice that I haven't noticed before now, something low and subtly grating. Even the real Rick never sounded like that. He holds something up, one eyebrow arched. When I see what he's holding, my stomach plummets. The results of the DNA test. 3 years ago, I was looking at the local job classifieds online when one of the ads caught my eye, not because of what it said, but because it said so little. Best I remember the ad, just read job available, good pay, no benefits, discretion required. It then listed an email address, and that was all. At the time, I was managing a music store, but I had already started hearing rumors we would be shutting down within the next year, and the likelihood of a transfer to another store was slim. I had been morosely looking at job listings for the last few days, but this was the first one that stood out, if only because I was bored, and it was weird. So I sent an email. Half an hour later, I had a response telling me to go to a particular office building in an upscale part of the city at a precise time for my screening. I went, and after waiting for a few minutes in the lobby, I was taken into an office where I was given a series of forms and questionnaire to fill out. They collected them and told me they would be in touch. I had almost forgotten about the whole thing until a month later I got a call saying I had moved on to the second stage of the hiring process. I was again given an address and time, and when I arrived this time, it was a different, nice office park 20 miles away from the first one. I was met by a man who introduced himself as Mr. Solomon. He escorted me into a large room that contained a chair and a desk. On the desk were 2 large monitors, a keyboard and mouse, and a bolted-down metal box with 2 oversized buttons on it, one red and one green. He told me this room was a model for the place I would be working if I took the job. He described the job as follows. I would be working 7 shifts of 6 hours every week. My job would be simple. I would arrive at work 10 minutes early and enter an outer area that was like a locker room. I would have my own personal locker. I would store all belongings in the locker and change into the provided work clothes. I was never under any circumstances to carry any item of my own into the surveillance room. I was never under any circumstances to take any item with me from the surveillance room. As for what I was to do in the surveillance room, I was told that the monitor on the left would constantly show a live stream from a high-definition camera in a remote location. My job was simply to watch the camera. Once an hour, I would get onto the computer attached to the right monitor and enter a brief log describing anything interesting that occurred in the last hour. I would have no pens or pencils or paper, and I should never try to take any kind of written notes about the work. As for the red and green buttons, the red button was only to be used if there was an emergency. This meant something on the video or in my workspace that required outside help. The green button was to be hit if I saw something on the video feed that was particularly noteworthy. It would tell other people somewhere that, at least in my opinion, something interesting was going on. Solomon stressed that while I was given discretion on when to use this button, I should err on the side of only using it if and when something of real significance occurred. He pointed out the camera on the ceiling of the room we were in. He said the real room would be the same. My work would be observed, and other people were watching the room on the video feed as well. He said I was only a redundancy in case other systems failed. He then smirked and asked if I knew what he meant by redundancy. I nodded, trying not to show my irritation. I don't talk that good to people, so sometimes they think I'm dumb. That's okay. Let him think that if he paid me good enough. The pay was very good, $35 an hour. This worried me. I was already thinking this was some kind of psych experiment or secret government job, which I was okay with. But that kind of money to sit and watch a screen, my mom always told me that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, and this was seeming too good to be true. I asked if I was going to be doing anything illegal. Solomon laughed and said no. I asked if anyone was going to get hurt. Again, he shook his head no. He said the reason they were paying so much was because they needed employees that were motivated to be professional and discreet. The work they were doing was important, and for various reasons it couldn't be discussed. If I took the job, I would have to sign papers promising I would never discuss my work there, or I could be sued or locked up. I'm only breaking that now because of everything that's happened. So I took the job, and because they wanted me to start right away, I had to quit the store with no notice. I felt bad about that, but I was excited about the new job too. It was a lot of money and seemed like easy enough work, if a bit boring. I was nervous that there was something more to it, but I told myself I would just have to see no point in chickening out and wasting a good chance, because I let my imagination go crazy. I was given the location of the job itself, and when I went there I was amazed that it really was just like the model room I had been shown, with only a few differences. There was a locker room. You had to pass through to enter the surveillance room, and there was a small bathroom. Attached to the real surveillance room also, the real room had a small water cooler in the corner. But because I wasn't allowed to bring anything in with me, I had to eat before or after every shift. The biggest difference, of course, was that the monitors were turned on. The right monitor was just a black and white terminal like you see in movies. Sometimes I could type in my logs, but no internet to look at or anything like that. The left monitor, it was video from a room. You would call it a bedroom. I guess because it had a bed in it, but it had lots of other stuff too. A TV, a sofa, and chairs. A couple of tables and plenty of empty space in between. The camera must be high up in a corner because I could see pretty much everything except for the far sides of furniture. At first, though, I didn't notice any of that stuff. All I saw was her. She looked to be a little older than me and was very pretty. When I first saw her, she was laying on her side on the sofa. That was the part of the room farthest from the camera, but the picture was very clear, and I could tell that she was sleeping. I found myself leaning into the monitor, more so I could see her better, and then I thought about what I was doing and felt embarrassed. It's like I was spying on her, a peeping Tom, my mom used to call it. I didn't want to be a peeping Tom, but I didn't want to be silly. Either I needed to think about it slow. It was a good job, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? I wasn't hurting anybody. The woman looked fine, and the room was nice. She'd probably agreed to be there, and it's all some experiment or something. I was just overreacting, so I sat down in the chair and began my work. It didn't take long before I understood. More, the woman I took to calling her Rachel wasn't there of her free will. I never saw her hurt, but it was clear that she never left that room, except to go into what I think is a bathroom area that my camera couldn't see. Well, she never left the room on her own. Periodically, usually a couple of times a week during my shifts, men and women in strange-looking outfits would come in and take her from the room. Sometimes she would struggle, but usually she would just go along with her head hung low. They would always bring her back, though. The times when she wasn't brought back during my shift were always the worst for me. I would worry about her until I got to work the next day and saw her in the room watching TV or painting. She never looked hurt or even that upset, except for when they took her, and even when she fought, they were always gentle with her. Still, I knew something was wrong. I considered quitting the job, or hitting the red button and getting someone to come, so I could get some answers, or calling the police and showing them what the camera was showing me. Except I was scared of losing my job and scared of what these people might do to me if I quit or told on them. Solomon had told me when I took the job that part of being discreet was not asking questions. I would never be asked to do more than I had already been told, but I could never tell anyone what I did or saw, and I could never ask questions about what I was doing or why so. I made excuses. It was all an experiment. She was crazy or sick, and they were trying to help her. She was doing a job just like I was, or if she really was a prisoner somewhere, at least I was watching to make sure that she was okay, if they ever tried to hurt her, or I saw that she really didn't want to be there. For sure I could get help then. In a way, I told myself, I was helping to protect her by watching. I don't expect you to think much of my excuses. I don't think much of them myself, especially now, but in my defense, when things changed, I didn't ignore it or try to explain it away. I knew something had to be done. Rachel would usually paint for an hour or two every day, and it seemed to always be during my afternoon shifts. The room had no windows, as far as I could tell, but I guess she either used a clock or her own body's time to keep to a kind of schedule. I always liked to watch her paint. The thing she was painting was always facing the wrong way for me to see it, but I could see her face as she worked. She always looked peaceful and happy when she was painting, and seeing her that way, smiling serenely from time to time as she got something the way she wanted, it always made my day. I first noticed something was wrong when she started painting more frequently a few weeks ago. Her expression was more focused and serious, and there was a tension to her movements that I wasn't used to seeing at first. I thought she was just really trying to work hard on something, and I wanted to tell her not to worry. Every few weeks the others would come in and take the old paintings out anyway, bringing in a new stack of, I think the word is canvas, but it was more than her being focused. Something was wrong. She didn't look happy, and she was going for hours at a time. In the span of 3 days she had finished 4 paintings. I had been growing more and more worried watching her work, and when she finished the 4th I found myself telling her to just stop and rest a while. I had grown accustomed to talking to the monitor, talking to her in my own way. But she didn't stop. Instead, she began moving the paintings, arranging them on the back and seat of the long sofa at the far end of the room. This was the first time I had gotten to see any of the paintings, even when the others were taking them out. They always seemed to be turned away from the camera. I was still worried about her, but I was also happy to finally see something she had worked on. Happy and amazed. They were beautiful. One was a beautiful green forest. Another was an old stone well. A third was a house sitting alone on a small island. The last was an old-fashioned looking movie theater. All of them looked like something out of a dream, with trailing lines of color mixing in the air around them, like leaves caught in a wind. It was only when I looked close that I realized the lines of color weren't random. They were words easy to miss if you weren't looking close. And by themselves they didn't seem to mean much, just the ghost of a word somewhere in each of the paintings, easy to lose in everything else that was being shown. I leaned into the monitor and squinted, trying to read the words. Then my heart started thudding as I made them out. Blinking and rubbing my eyes, I looked again, reading them out loud in order, left to right, top pair, then bottom. Please help me, Thomas. I pushed back from the monitor, my hand over my mouth. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how any of this could be happening. It wasn't just that she was asking for help, though. That was a big part of it. Something walks whistling past my house every night at 303. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street, whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 303. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane, near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there, but they were never too hard on us, since we always stuck to the one big rule: don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6, and I love it. The houses are small but well-kept, good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it, and there's only the two strange things: hear the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom, but Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the U.S. as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker than ours, move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much, and to always remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look, even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before at 303. When the sound starts, I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often, at least I haven't caught her much, but once or twice a month. I think she sits out there on our big red couch just listening. The Whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either, but good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's small things: winning a radio contest, or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard, you know, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good, and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings. I've heard my mom say about living here, but the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick. Something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember, small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell they were confused. But my parents knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed even after we found out that, for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then some bad things happen, but they only happen if you look for the Whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room, where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 303 and ended at the tick of 305. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the Whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked anything that could go wrong. With the manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clipping stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again, no presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on new neighbors. At one point my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere, and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom, and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good, and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad awake, sitting on the living room couch holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a she motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat, and we waited. At exactly 303, we heard the whistling day that came, and it went just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring them macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously, or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in across the street from us. The previous owner, Ms. Maddie, passed away at age 105. She'd lived a good long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee took my dad's advice about the locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son Holden to stay with us. He was 12 a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. Do you know who is always out there whistling every night? Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. We don't talk about that, I said. I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner. Holden said, Mr. Tolles. My sister asked, No way, he's really nice. Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer. Then Nola tensed. We don't talk about it, I repeated. Let's go in my room and play Nintendo. We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy after my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed. Holden stood up from his bean bag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. Have you ever even tried looking? He asked. It's nearly time. Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. We don't. See, I can't even try to look, because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key. He continued ignoring me. So does our dad, said Nola. No, replied Holden. No, he doesn't. You saw him do it, I said a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. Your dad locks the blinds? Yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal key chain. So I asked, worried. I already knew what he would say next, because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all of these years, because he knew we took it seriously. So after your dad locked up, but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to blinds, Nola, and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. You're lying, I said. Holden shrugged. You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand. Stay here, I told both of them. Don't move a muscle. I hurried over to my parents' room, but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry, beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with a whistler. Right outside, I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound. Every night since we moved into the house, they never told us, I don't think. I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad's soft sounds from the Living room brought me back to reality. "Nola," I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen clock hands, nailed to the face, but I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down, so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. "Don't look okay," I told her. "Don't turn around." We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. "Holden," I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window eyes. Still sealed shut, the glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blinds shut. I opened my eyes in the dim light leaking out from the kitchen. I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden," I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale, had bit his lip so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked. From behind me, I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night in that moment. An old, ugly terror stitched on his face. A parent's fear. "Just Holden," he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved, I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden, and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't, Dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." Thud, thud, thud. This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again, and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. Thud, thud, thud. "Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. Do you think he was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap, tap, tap? The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her police call. The police tap, tap, tap. My mom pulled us closer. "Police, police, police, police. Please stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook. Then it stopped. After a long moment I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. front to back, back to front, loud then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once. Or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop," Holden yelled. "The knocking died, I won't tell." Holden said, staring at the door, "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it, a soft tap, tap, coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing, like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back so loud it was impossible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room and the knocking stopped. Only the tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then come back in. "Okay," he told us. "It's done." Holden's parents came back. Around lunchtime, my mom and dad walked Holden over to his house, and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza, and watched movies that night. Everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair. He'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night, or any nights, since we didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week. But by Thursday there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. "Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light. Go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies." I think Holden's parents must have looked either to comfort him if they didn't believe or share the burden if they did. I watched Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower. If she'd looked out the window that night, would I have looked too? To comfort her, to share that burden. I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. And my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. I was lying alone in my room when I heard the voice, deep and crackly, coming from beneath my bed. "Hey," the voice called out. I told myself I was just imagining it. "Hey, kid," the voice repeated. I drew my knees up to my chest and ducked my head under the blanket, trying to shut out the voice and the cold wind that drifted in through the window, ruffling the curtains. "Who are you?" I asked. "In the monster underneath your bed." The voice replied, "You mean you're real?" I asked, "What do you mean, the monster?" Said, "Of course I'm real." "Do you have a name?" I asked. "Of course I have a name." "Oh, well, what is it?" "Frank." "Frank, yeah." The monster said, "Is there something wrong with it?" "No. I mean, I don't know." I said, "It's just not very monsterly." Well, my parents didn't want me to be a monster. Really, what did they want you to be? A dentist? That's funny, I said. I could feel myself beginning to smile. "What do your parents want you to be?" it asked. "I don't know." "Hey, Frank, yeah, aren't you gonna, scare me or something?" "What?" Why would I do that? Well, you're a monster, aren't you? Well, yeah, of course I am. But that doesn't mean that I scare little kids. But I thought that was your job. It is my job to scare people, he replied. But only bad people? Am I a bad person? I asked. No. He said, but you're not the one. I'm here to scare. Who are you here to scare? I asked the man inside your closet, the skin on my arms. Goose fleshed up. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but I fell silent as I heard a rustling coming from the closet. The door creaked open, and I could hear soft footsteps padding towards me across the bedroom floor. I didn't dare peek out of the blanket. The footsteps stopped, and I could hear heavy breathing next to me. I squeezed my eyes tight. The warm sanctuary of the blanket disappeared as it was yanked off me. I hugged my arms around my knees and prepared for the worst. A scream shattered the night air, followed by the sound of breaking glass. I opened my eyes a crack to see a knife lying on the carpet next to my bed, blade glinting in the moonlight. My parents rushed into the room and asked me what had happened, but I didn't know what to say, only that someone had been hiding in my closet and they jumped out the window. My parents called 911 and the police came right away. They picked up a man called Gary Townsend, sprinting through the streets. A couple blocks away, he was covered in blood and broken glass. They found Gary's car abandoned on our property, and inside they found duct tape, knives, barbiturates, and a video camera. From what I heard, Gary's lawyer employed an insanity defense, and Gary is currently incarcerated in a state mental facility for the criminally insane. I never heard from Frank the Monster again, but the officer who arrested Gary told me that he sleeps on the floor of the facility. He tells the doctors that he's terrified of Frank the Monster under his bed.